Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So, Mr. Emmanuel, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. What about you?
Yeah, I can't complain, all good from my side. So, welcome to another session of our ongoing Azure series. So, for this series, we're going to go into security. And for this specific episode, we're going to look into Azure Bastion. Last week, we went into the overview of Azure, and we did run into um, Azure VM. So after we did the deployment, one of the key things that you have to think about is security. We can actually SSH into the Azure, but you need to also think about a more secure way of doing this. When you enable SSH for your virtual machines on Azure or even any platform for that matter, you essentially expose it to the public internet. So that means anyone can actually attempt to SSH into it. And bad actors might try to brute force, try to attempt to see if they can actually use any random password to guess your password essentially. Right. Obviously, you can lock it down to a specific range of IP addresses to create a level of what are the IPs that can actually access your virtual machine. But in a scenario whereby that resource has to be accessed by a lot of people and the IP address changes, then that can become a more challenging way of doing it. Right. But Microsoft have what we call Azure Bastion, and this will allow you to, or anyone that should connect to that instance have access to it. And they can actually connect to the instance by using HTTPS. So it's more encrypted and it's not going to use the SSH in that regard. So that means you don't have to enable SSH in your network security group for that matter. So we're going to go into that. So I have already prepared a virtual machine for this scenario. So I've got one virtual machine here, VM test, that is actively running. So at the moment, the way you can actually connect to this is by using SSH. But I'm just going to disable this SSH access. So I'm just going to go straight into networking on this virtual machine and then click on the network security group. And in the network security group, you can see SSH is enabled. And as you can see, the source is any. So that means inbound connection from outside, anyone can actually literally attempt to connect to it, which is not best practice. So that's the reason why you have this warning sign next to it, because literally anyone from the public can actually attempt to connect to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable this. So I can come in here and then set it to deny and then click on save. Okay, so once this is set to deny, no one can connect to this instance. But then we need to be able to find a way to connect to it. That's when Azure Bastion actually comes into play here. Right, so for us to set this up, we need to first of all set up the Azure Bastion subnet. And setting up Azure Bastion subnet, you need to name it in a specific unique naming scheme. So let's start that. So I'll go back to the network session, and then in the virtual network for my virtual machine, I will click on the subnet, or I'll click on the VNet. So here I will see all the subnet that is in this that is mapped to this specific virtual machine, and I'll create a new subnet for Azure Bastion. Right. So to do that, you simply have to click on subnet at the top. So you can specify the purpose. So you can select Azure Bastion. So when you select Azure Bastion, it should name it for you. So as soon as I select the purpose for this subnet and I select Azure Bastion, instantly you notice that the name is set to Azure Bastion subnet. Right. So that's all you need to do in terms of naming the subnet. And as you can see, it have also scoped the sizing for me to /64. So that's the minimum address scheme for the Azure Bastion subnet. Obviously, you can make it more larger if you choose to, but 64 addresses in this subnet is adequate. All right. All right. So once you have it set to that, you can then proceed to click on add. And that will add a new subnet within this network. So the virtual machine operates in this specific subnet here, the default. And to connect to this virtual machine, this subnet, we're going to leverage the Azure Bastion network. Right. So once you create this, then we can proceed to set up Azure Bastion. So what to do? Simple. Just go into the search at the top and then type in Bastion. So that will take you directly to the Bastion. So the Bastion is one of the platform as a service services. All right. So that means the underlying infrastructure is managed by Microsoft. So you simply click on create, and then you select your resource group, or you can define a resource group. I already have a resource group here, VM test RG, and then you can then give this a name. Actually, what I'll do is, let me just name this one at Bastion 1. So for the networking, this is where we will select the network that we created. So this is the network right there, VM test VNet. And then as soon as I select that, it will identify that there's already an existing Bastion subnet, and it'll pick that up. If that wasn't the case, then I can proceed to create the Bastion subnet manually here as well. So by naming it the same name as Azure Bastion subnet, that should be what I simply have to do. So once you've done that, you need a public IP address as well. So I'll leave that one to create a new one. And then I'll simply click on review and create. That's about it. So that should validate all the information. And once it passes, you get this validation pass information at the top. Then you can proceed to click on create. So it's very simple. So with this, you don't have to enable any SSH. It will allow you to connect to the resource without setting up any external access. So this is applicable to both SSH and also RDP. So if you have Windows host and you have to RDP to those instances, then you can perform the same process as we've done here, right? And also any of the virtual machines within the same subnet, you can connect to it using Azure Bastion as well. All right, so let's give it a moment or two for this process to complete. So Ima, I will see it's very simple and easy for you to really set up Azure Bastion.
Yeah, it's very easy. Yeah, at least for security reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you set this up, you can continuously add more virtual machines into the virtual machine subnet, and all of them can be accessed directly using the Bastion. Even as a practice, you can probably run a test on your instance. If you exposed your test to SSH, after probably about an hour or two, you notice that there will be a lot of traffic, people trying to brute force your VM. So for best practice, leveraging Azure Bastion is the way to go.
So you deploy the virtual machines into the Bastion subnet?
No. So the virtual machine will still stay in the default subnet, right? But the virtual machines and the Bastion subnet can actually talk to each other, right? So that means once it's set up, we can still connect to those virtual machines in a default subnet from the Bastion application. So let me show you real quick. So I'm just going to go into another port. I'll leave this one running and go in here. All right, so if I go into the virtual machine, all right, let me just remove this one. you will notice that in the network, the virtual network, there are two subnet currently. So I'm just going to, so this is the virtual machine. So if I go into the networks section here, all right, now, and then I'll click on the virtual network, right? So at the moment it's using this subnet. So I can go straight to that subnet. So if I go to that subnet there, you notice that in the virtual network for this VM, there are two networks. The default network, this is where your virtual machine is actually getting the IP addresses from, and this is the Azure Bastion. This is where the Bastion services will live, right? So now if I go to, let's say, connected device, you notice that currently in a connected device, your virtual machine, your VM is getting this IP address, and the subnet that is in is the default subnet, right? Let's go back to this one here. So deployment is still in progress. All right. So as you can see from here, this is complete. Deployment is completed. Now let's go ahead and connect to the virtual machine using Azure Bastion. So to do this, let's go back to the VM. So let's go back to the VM machines and then click on the VM that you want to connect to. And we can see that this is currently running. To connect to it, you can click on connect right there and then click on connect via Bastion. All right, so this is a Linux host. So we're going to connect by SSH. So I'll leave it as SSH. And the authentication type is password. So if it was SSH, then you can select it accordingly. Or if the SSH key is saving to your Azure keyboard, then you can select that as well. But for this instance, we are using VM password, so we can leave it as it is. Then we can give it the name. So this one is AZ user. And then we can type in the password. All right, so once you type the password, then we can, you say open in a new browser. So we can simply click on connect. And this should open up a new browser and it will start to establish the connection to the VM. Right, there you go. Right, it's connected. All right, so one of the key factors that we need to take into consideration when we are setting this up is to ensure that the networking aspect, everything is all good. So that means we need to check the NSG. So NSG is a network security group. So for this to effectively connect, we need to ensure that port 443 is allowed, right? So if because we actually rely on port 443, if that is not allowed, then obviously that is going to cause some issues. So once port 443 is allowed to allow traffic to go on, then it will establish the connection. So that means we've now connected to our virtual machine using HTTPS, right? Essentially, not using SSH. So you can literally start to run any commands like you would normally do. If you want to check what the IP address is, just to make sure that you are really logged into it, you can use zip.com, and that will tell you what the IP address of that server is. All right. And when you go into the network, so the VNet, so if you go into the VNet, where the networks are, so it's this network here. So if you click on that network and you check connected devices, right? At the moment, you notice that it will show the Bastion, and also it will show the interface for our virtual network. That's for the virtual machine. All right. So that's it for the connection. So it's quite straightforward in terms of setting this up. Just that it runs on 443, so you just have to make sure that port 443 is allowed for this to establish the connection. All right. So yeah, so thank you for joining this session. I hope you found this to be informative. All right, so if anyone have any questions, make sure you drop it on the comment section. All right, and Ima, thank you for joining the session.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Have a wonderful day.
Okay.